A little bit different than usual. Usually I'm talking to an author and I have them explain what their book is. This time, it's not a book, it's an entire publisher. So, you didn't get a little preamble from Alan explaining a plot line. We're just going to dive into talking about shortwave publishing in general. So, really quick, shortwave publishing got on my radar in 2023, I believe. The cover for Narcissus, which you can see, you might be able to see. Sometimes I trim the edges of the video, by Adam Godfrey caught my eye. And I think, honestly, Alan, I think that the way that it got on my radar was that it was on Emily Hughes's list, that list that she does every year.
Mhm.
And I saw that, I was like reading through, and I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. And then I looked at it, and I was like, hello. Um, so anyway, the cover design caught my eye, and then I was like, man, that's not a lot of pages. I could read that really quick and talk to the author, and that's kind of why I got that ball rolling. So that's my introduction to shortwave publishing. Um, and from there, you have been just this like rich vein of content for me over the last couple of years. So I'm very thankful for that. But really, honestly, I think that the place that it makes sense to start this conversation is if you don't mind explaining, what the origin story of shortwave publishing is. How did you get the idea? How did you get started? And then later on, I'm sure we can talk about all the stumbles and fumbles on the way and the successes, but like just like a general origin story to get us going.
Sure. Um, well, it didn't start as a publishing company at all. It started as a vanity press for my own book. I had been writing my novel for a while, and I had looked around at the publishing world at that point and realized that indie was the way I wanted to go. And the more I looked into indie, the more I was like, hey, I have the skills to do these things. I can lay out a book, I can design a cover. And so I decided to self publish that first book. And I didn't want it to just say published by Alan, so I needed a name to put on the spine. And Shortwave was the name of two songs I had written in the past, and I decided that sounded cool for a name on a spine, and started the LLC at that point for my book. And that was as far as my plans had gone as far as publishing. Um, Now, most indie books, especially self-published indie books, sell fewer than 200 copies. And so my goal was, okay, if I can get 200 pre-orders, we'll be pretty good. If I can hit that. And in that first year, we ended up selling 1,500 copies. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, if I can do this for myself, I can do this for other people. And at the time, one of my good friends, Nicole, had started writing a cozy mystery series, but she wasn't sure what to do with it. And so I reached out and I was just like, hey, I recently published my own book. Sales were good. Got good feedback on design, won a couple awards. Maybe I give your cozy mystery series a shot. And so that's kind of how Shortwave started. Was just I had a friend who had a series that didn't know what to do with it, and I started publishing that. That first book was an editor's choice at Book Life, and did really well. We ended up doing four novels in that series before we drew the series to a close. Everything took off really quickly after that. Narcissus was one of our first five or six titles. It was very early on, and yeah, and then we hit the ground running because I was like, hey, I like this. This is fun, and I felt like I was doing something good for other authors, which felt nice. And it kept, my name out there and my book out there as well. So, there's a sliver of self-serving there, but, yeah, that was just kind of how it started. It wasn't really hey, I'm going to sit down and start a big indie press and, launch into the horror world. It was just kind of I need a name to put on the spine of my own book. And then that book did really well. And so it was like, all right, let's do this with other people. That sounds fun.
I love that. I love that the name was inspired from a song you wrote too, because when I was talking to Clay McLeod Chapman, he was talking about how he kind of thinks of indie publishers like record labels, and that made me think about the record label Wax Trax. I don't know if you know Wax Trax Records from
Hmm.
back in the day, and like there's a whole documentary called Industrial Accident or something. It's really nice. But anyway, like the whole thing about Wax Trax was they were putting out stuff that they like were so solidly confident was good. Even if it's not what people were like saying, they wanted, they were like, this is good, I'm putting this out. And then everybody realized, oh, these people know what they're talking about. And so like I kind of drew a connection with Wax Trax and you as far as like um these are new names. These are not everybody's a new name. Obviously, you've got some of the, kind of established names in horror that work with you, but also you have far lesser known names like Adam Godfrey. I believe that was his first
That was
publication.
his debut. Yeah.
Yeah. Chloe Spencer's Mewing is right here, and I know that she's very prolific, so she's got a ton of stuff. But that was like an earlier on, like that was the first time her name had crossed my attention and stuff, and so I liked the comparison. I know it's kind of maybe a lofty comparison, but
No, I don't think so. I mean, in fact, if it weren't for a record label, Shortwave wouldn't exist at all, actually. I started a record label with two of my friends, John and Hank Green, who are both also authors. John did The Fault in Our Stars, which was got a movie
mm,
adaptation like 10 years ago.
mhm.
We started a record label back in our YouTube days, back in 2008. And we put out our friends' CDs and vinyl, helped them set up tours, did their t-shirts and posters, that kind of stuff. And that label was very successful, and it provided the money that I use today to kind of start Shortwave. Like it's a big investment starting a publishing company the right way. And if it weren't for that record label being successful 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to start Shortwave the way that I did. I would not have been able to take on 12 to 15 titles a year the way that I did. That's a full-time job. That's something that you cannot work another job doing. So you have to have the money to be able to fund
Right.
yourself while you build the publishing company, because publishing companies aren't something that are immediately profitable. It's going to take 3 to 5 years before you can start turning a profit, because in the early days you're investing in a ton of stuff, which we can go into later. But yeah, so I mean the record label comparison is perfect, actually, because if it weren't for that record label with John and Hank, Shortwave wouldn't exist the way that it does today.
I love that. But then also it makes me think several people that I've talked to have commented on just the presentation. So the even well, probably you're pretty notorious for like your packaging materials, your boxes and stuff, which are probably off camera, but like the Q quarterly boxes are up there. Your general shortwave boxes that you ship out in the Killer VHS series boxes. When I was talking to Todd Kiesling, he held up the box that obsolescence comes in, and so there's a lot of like marketing and promotion that it's the fine details I think is what you're doing that for me stands out a lot too. So was that also inspired by kind of how you would promote music and stuff like or is that just hey I'm going all in, I gotta you know I gotta do
I think
everything
it's
possible.
Yeah, I think it's a blend between. So with the music stuff, we did a lot of promotional merch in addition to it, because most fans these days don't want to buy a CD or a record. They want to buy a T-shirt, a poster, a plushie. They want to buy a keychain. They want physical objects that represent the artist that they enjoy.
Yeah.
But the music they can get on Spotify or YouTube or Apple or wherever. Like they don't need the CD for that, like we did back when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I needed the CD if I wanted to listen to that music.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we the record label started as just CDs and vinyl, but very quickly moved over into 80% was merch items, not music items. And so I kind of learned that way that those kind of promotional things kind of help, especially as Instagram and other social media became so visual. Having that box that people can show off when they get the book helps us get more eyeballs on the book. More people want to post about the book. Look at this great packaging it came in. Look at this nice presentation. They want to show off the artwork. It makes it feel a little bit more special. If you're going to buy a brown box to ship the book in, that's going to cost you 80 cents. If you want to get a branded printed box, it's going to cost you $1.20. So for that extra 40 cents, I can send you something that you want to show off, not something that you want to recycle, And so in my eyes, like, yes, it's a little bit of an additional cost. Takes a little bit longer for us to get to profit, but it's going to help us kind of build a street team, a street army of people who want to show off our books and want to show off the thing, and yeah, I feel like when you get something like that in the mail, it just feels a little more unique, a little bit more like, the money you spent buying direct was worth it versus going to Amazon or anywhere else. So yeah, it was kind of a combination of those things, and then just as I worked harder and made more money, I was able to afford nicer books. And so sometimes, like, like the Folio Society editions, or, some of the Cemetery Dance limited editions, and those always came in really nice packaging, and they feel really nice when you get them. And we're certainly not at that level yet, but that is something I aspire to have a line of those types of limited editions in the future, because I think they're great when you're a huge fan of a book. Obviously, you don't need that to read a book. You can go get the $9 paperback. It's the exact same words inside. But sometimes when you're a super fan of something, you want the nicest version of it available. So
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to how you're packaging in the boxes and stuff like that, and that kind of special experience, it's a real first impression thing too. So I got, Adam's book. That was, I think, the first thing. And so, or, when I first got stuff directly from Shortwave, I get that package, I open it up, and I'm like, okay, so I need to pay attention to these guys because obviously they're putting care into this situation. So the first impression is I'm taking these people seriously as opposed to, oh, I got the book I ordered. So, yeah, I think that does that 40 cents difference. And, actually, my day job, I work for a marketing promotion company. So we make swag for companies. And so I know like the difference from like the cheap packaging to and so I was like, okay, so I get that these people are putting extra care into um, their operation, which means that extra care in packaging, I'm going to infer probably extra care is being taken in other places as well. So I think that's an investment that's probably paying dividends for you.
definitely, especially in help getting the word out. One of the things that indie presses struggle with the most are marketing budgets. Even though we include a marketing budget in 90% of our contracts, it's never enough. It's like you want to do more. You want to do NetGalley, and that costs a couple $100, and you want to do a Goodreads giveaway, and that costs a couple $100, and you want to do a book bub, and that costs a couple $100. No matter how much you include in the marketing budget, there's just never enough to do all the things you want to do. And so having some of the Instagram influencers and book talk people, sharing these boxes and stuff, and which then shares the book, is helpful in that area. But yeah, I mean, Luckily, because of the success of the record label, I'm able to take the time to make sure that the quality is there at every step of the way. Like, I don't need to turn a quick profit. So I'm not going to be like, hey, let's just get this book out there no matter what. We need to make a profit on this kind of thing. No, let's take our time. Let's get it right.
Yep.
Let's do the 3 passes on the proof edit. Let's spend an additional time. We've had some books come in where it's like, hey, we need to maybe spend an extra 3 months revising this. Like, I think we need to rewrite the second half of this book or something. There have been instances of that where it just I want to make sure we're always putting out the best thing possible, not just I'll take whatever you give me and throw it on paper, like kind of thing. And luckily, I'm grateful that that's kind of the impression that those boxes make, because that's kind of the point. Yeah, it's just like every aspect of this. It's one of the reasons why I've always done standalone novelettes as one thing. It's like nobody gives shorter work their due credit, I think.
Yeah.
Whether it's a short story, which we release as standalone chapbooks, so you can buy a physical copy of a short story when you like it, or the novelettes, which, we've had IMI, we've had, Have You Decided on Your Question, some D7 from Fracassi, like a lot of really cool novelettes that are standalone. Like, those aren't big money makers, that you can't
Yeah.
sell them for very much. They're very small, which means they don't get reviewed as often. They don't get put onto lists of, top 10 books you have to read this October. We never make it on those lists because a lot of times our stuff is just too small or short for those types of things. And it is something we're going to have to move away from as we grow, just because if you want distribution and you want bookstores, they want novels. They want
Yep.
novel length works. They're not going to stock a bunch of novelettes on their shelves. So that's unfortunate. But I guess the point I was trying to make there was I put the same kind of care into a novelette that I'm going to put into a novel. It's going to get a book plate. It's going to get its own unique standalone paperback.
Yep.
It's going to get the same treatment, because I think that those things are important. And luckily, because of the successes in the past, I'm able to take the time to make those things important and to prioritize making them feel special and not just making them a product.
Yeah. One now I'm second guessing if I have this right, but one title that comes to mind is When the Devil.
Mm-hmm. That was another novelette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Because it's like this tiny little thing and it's like very few pages, but that story fucking punches you in the face. And like one of the things that I'm very grateful for is that like there is a space that exists right now where people are taking that seriously, like you said. The chapbooks, before before you were putting out those chapbooks by Clay and Nat, who was doing chapbooks? I didn't see anybody doing. Now Rapture Publishing exists, and like there's kind of like momentum growing, but yeah, it was very refreshing for me to see. And the other point off of what you were saying that I thought of was that when I was talking to Nat Cassidy about Red Stop, he talked about how quickly you turn that around. So I know you said that you give care and you make sure that like um, if it needs more time, we're going to take more time. But also, he highlighted the fact that when you have a product that's ready to go, you can move it way faster than traditional publishing can. And so he made it sound like it was like about a month or so between getting you the story and it was ready to go. And maybe that's an exaggeration, but like there's a little bit of a flexibility there that doesn't exist in traditional publishing too.
Well, especially because I'm kind of handling everything, so that makes it. I don't have to wait on responses from people. I don't have to wait for other people to approve it. Wait for them to get to their inbox. You know, if it were a step where I'm like, okay, I need someone else to design the interior. I need someone else to design the exterior. I need someone else to get it into the system. I need some. Like if I were waiting on all those things like traditional publishing have to, yeah, you're talking each step is going to take an extra week or two or three, depending on how on top of it people are. But I can do those things in one day. If I need to set up a product page, okay, I go take 15 minutes and set up a product page. If I need to get it into the distribution system with the metadata, okay, I go take a half hour and put the metadata into the distribution system. Like I can do those things very quickly. I mean, the interior and cover obviously take a little bit longer, but as soon as he starts pitching me the idea and he sends me the rough draft, my brain starts working on cover art, you know, and that kind of stuff. And for Rest Stop, it's funny because the cover was meant to be temporary. I had designed
Yes.
the tile floor with the blood splatter as just a title coming soon kind of thing. And maybe I went a little too far and had a little too much fun with it. But when we came time to discuss the cover art, he was just like, can we go with the temp art? I was like, I guess we kind of stole our own thunder on a cover reveal, but yeah, we can go with the temp art. And so that was, I mean, it's also a good feeling of just like, you know, something I was able to put together, kind of on first impressions was, you know, the thing that he wanted to go with. And, you know, we've been very lucky with how Rest Stop has performed for us. It's our best selling title by far, so far. And, yeah, the response to it has been great. The turnaround was pretty fast. It was probably a little bit more than a month or two, but you know, there were very few edits I had to make. I had a couple of suggestions for the first two, three chapters, and Nat implemented those. The rest of it was really solid, was really good to go. You know, and then yeah, did the design I think took the interiors maybe 2 3 days. To most of that time was spent getting you know some of the googly eyes correct that appear inside the paperback. Some of them were there's a number of different font choices inside to kind of highlight some areas. We don't typically do numerous fonts in books, but that was one of them where it kind of demanded it. Yeah, and then you just want to make sure the book has enough time for pre-order. You know, I prefer to have at least 6 months of pre-order time, get the title out there. I know indie sometimes a little bit shorter, and we
Yeah.
can move faster if we have to. If it's like, hey, you want this book coming out next month, realize you're giving up a lot of sales to only have a 1 month pre-order, but we, you know, we can do that. That is a possibility. Going forward, you know, looking at distribution in bookstores, that's no longer going to be a possibility because
Right.
bookstores want it a month before it comes out, and the distributor wants it 2 months before it comes out. And at that point, you have to have it printed. And if you're going to do a print run, okay, well now you're talking a month or two at the printers. So suddenly you're out 4 months of just you know from release date based on other people's expectations. So yeah, it'll
Yeah.
be a little bit slower going forward, but I'm still the one that's going to be doing the vast majority of the things that need to be done for that book, and so it's something where I'm still going to be able to move much faster, I think, than a lot of other publishers where they have a team of 10 people that all have to get on the same wavelength. That's a lot of effort to get 10 people thinking on the same thing. So
I have like four different ways I could follow that up. But the way that
sure.
I think I want to follow it up is like you're only one person and you are doing all those things. So like there's got to be a capacity for that too. Like the capacity I'm guessing is the number of titles you can work with in a year currently, right? Um, and I guess let's just acknowledge the big news, which I was so happy for you. You announced the distribution agreement with Simon and Schuster, and So that means that shortwave titles now will be distributed to bookstores through Simon and Schuster's kind of like infrastructure and stuff. So that's got to be huge. But is there a massive shift in kind of like you've already kind of mentioned some of the things like it'll take a little longer, and the types of books that you're going to be working with probably change a little bit. Are those the changes, or is there like a massive shift in like what your business needs to look like?
Yeah, I mean the biggest change is going to be the book length, mostly because bookstores, they have a certain word count they want for the shelf, and a lot of our work in the past has been a little bit shorter. We've done novels, we've done novel length collections, we've done anthologies, those kinds of things. It's not like it's completely new territory for us, but a lot of our stuff has been the novella territory. A lot of our stuff has been the chapbooks and novelettes, and those are things that bookstores just can't do anything with. Unless you're an indie shop. Like we've had great success with Little Ghosts and Vortex and places like that where they will
Yeah.
order direct, and they're like, hey, yeah, we'll take 10 of those chapbooks. Like, great, you can sell chapbooks. Barnes and Noble can't. So yeah, the big change is going to be just kind of the length of the work we're putting out. Just because bookstores are going to want to see 40,000 words or more for the vast majority of titles. Some of it is going to be I guess length really is just going to kind of be where it's at. Whether we're working with a debut author or whether we're working with somebody established. If we're working with an established name, we can get away with a little bit of a shorter book. Like they'll
Yeah.
take a novella from an established name. But yeah, and then a lot of it, the other change is going to be just timelines. Everything is going to need to be extended. As I briefly mentioned before, the distributor wants a book by a certain date, which means you need to get it to the printer by a certain date. The bookstores want it on a certain date. It takes time to ship everything in between all of those dates. So suddenly we only had to rely on one system previously, which was Ingram. We would get our information into Ingram. Ingram would ship it out to any bookstores that ordered. Now we're dealing with numerous steps in that process, which will result in higher quality books and will result in a little bit more profit per book. And the biggest result of the Simon & Schuster deal is going to be we get their sales team. So now instead of me going on social media and saying, please buy this book, it's freaking fantastic, now I have Simon & Schuster's sales team calling bookstores across the country saying, hey, pick up 10 copies of this book. It's really fantastic. And when you multiply that times the hundreds of stores they'll be calling, that's a pretty big deal, and that should be, for us, it was always the goal. When I first started this, I had no idea you needed 3 years of sales data before they would even talk to you. That was
Oh,
kind of a
wow.
learning experience. And had I known that, maybe I would have gone a little slower at the beginning. But I thought like, well, hey, if I get out there and I got a book coming out every single month, they have to pay attention to me, right? Like I'm always going to be in their face, and we're always going to be working on something new and exciting. And that's just not the way it is. They want to see 3 years of sale. They want to see that you know how to operate a small business. They want to see that you can stick with it, that you can hit your dates. And they want to see that you're growing in sales. And
Yeah.
thankfully, every year that we've been out, we have grown quite a bit. Some years have been double, triple the previous year in sales. And some of that just comes down to the number of titles we're releasing. Some of that comes down to some of the authors we're now able to work with. Thankfully, we established ourselves very early with some of the more established authors through our obsolescence anthology. That was kind of our big introduction project. It was like, let me introduce, myself to you. And in return, I need the horror community to introduce themselves to me because while I was a writer before, I wasn't like in the community. I wasn't somebody that people knew. I wasn't interacting with those folks on a regular basis. And so I needed a project that would let them know who I am, the quality of work that I could do. Like I was confident in my work quality. I wasn't confident in anything else. I wasn't confident I could sell copies to bookstores. I'd never done that before. I wasn't confident that I could, get starred reviews for them or anything like because I'd never done that before. But I was confident that I could make a really good looking book, a really well designed book. And so that's what I did. I pre-designed obsolescence when I approached the authors that I invited. I showed them the cover art, what it was going to be. I showed them the protective box that it comes in. Like I had all that stuff ready to go. And most of the big name authors that signed on to this book, because I was a brand new publisher, no one knew who the heck I was at that point. Most of them said it was because of the design work. They said, I could tell you were serious about this and I could tell you were going places with this. And that was why they signed on to do this project that, kind of came out of nowhere from a nobody company. yeah, and that has then allowed me to work with those bigger authors, which has resulted in those sales to where finally distributors were paying attention. This wasn't our first attempt at a distributor. It's been
Right.
quite a rough road there. We about a year ago, we had a distributor that was an inch away from signing us. They had me ship books to their offices overseas and in the US. They were reviewing the books and writing me these long emails about how great the books were and how excited they were to work with us. And I just kept waiting on that contract to arrive and waiting on that contract to arrive. And then out of nowhere, oh, sorry, we signed another horror publisher. We don't need two of them. Like, okay. But at that point, I'd already started pre-buying bigger books for the next year because I was like, oh, if we're going to have
Yeah.
distribution, I need something to show them. And that would allow me to stretch a little bit. And so I way overspent for 2025 on our books because we were supposed to have distribution this entire year. And when that didn't work out, that was a pretty big hit. And then we started talking to a second distributor right after that because I was starting to get a little desperate. I had paid a lot for these 2025 books, and had taken a big gamble for the year. And then that second distributor, they were like, yeah, we love what we see. We love your sales numbers. They even sent over a contract, which I signed, and they did not countersign for a few days. And then after the fifth or sixth day, I saw in the news they were filing for bankruptcy. So
Oh,
thank God they didn't countersign, because that would have been a mess. Thank God I didn't go to them, a few months earlier, because that would have been a mess. But that was our second brush at distribution. And at that point, I was beaten down. It was
yeah.
like I'd come so close two times, and I was like, okay, head down. I'm just going to focus on the books. The place that had passed the first time, they were like, come back in a year and we'll see where we're at that point. So I was like, okay, if I get my ducks in a row, I come back in October, November, and talk to them. But as the year went on, I was like, I don't know that I want to do that. Like they passed because they had already signed another horror pub. Like what sense does that make? We're obviously doing different books. We're obviously doing different markets, that kind of stuff. And then this hasn't been announced yet, but it's going to be soon. So I guess I'll talk about it, and maybe we can see if you have to cut it or not. But the way I got hooked up with Simon and Schuster was they reached out to me about licensing audio for some of our books.
Oh,
They
cool.
liked some of our titles and they wanted to license some audio. And while we were having those discussions, I mentioned we don't have distribution yet. I would love to get distribution.
Nice.
And so the audio guy was like, well, let me hook you up with our distribution guy and just see what he thinks. And so the distribution guy gave me a call, and we were on Zoom for 20 minutes before he offered me a contract. And he said, usually these calls last 2 hours. He's like, I know, I can tell just from your answers to these questions that you are ready for this. You know what you're talking about. You're good to go. And that was the best feeling because I had spent 3 years preparing for that 20-minute call,
Wow.
that then, led to the contract that is going to change everything for us. Like having a book go from being distributed by Ingram to having a book go from being distributed by Simon and Schuster is a gigantic leap. And the quality of the books that we have in our back catalog, multiplied by the quality of our books coming over the next 2 years that we already have contracts for. I mean, this should be the turning point. There's no reason that this shouldn't be, where Shortwave goes from, oh yeah, sometimes we make, those lists 10% of the time of books you need to read this October, to we should be hitting that list every year. The quality of the stuff that we're putting out, and I'm not even tooting my own horn here. I'm tooting the horn of all of our authors. Like
Right.
they are writing such great freaking books, and the thing that is standing in the way is distribution. Every single release that we're putting out, maybe not every, but the vast majority of releases we're putting out hit number one in their category on Ingram. That tells me that Ingram is what's holding us back. The distribution is what's holding
Yes.
us back. Because if we're hitting number one on their charts every single time, we should be going higher. And the only reason we're not is that the bookstores can't access our books because they're POD or because they're through Ingram, and the pricing discounts on Ingram are not great. That kind of stuff that keeps bookstores from ordering it. Why would you order my book, which only offers you a 35% discount through Ingram, when you could get another horror book from Simon and Schuster that offers you a 55% discount? Of course, you're going to take the Simon and Schuster book
Yep.
every single time. And that is such a shame for the great work that our authors are putting out. And that's why I fought so hard for this. It's like they're doing great work that's being held back artificially, and it's time to break through that barrier. And this contract does that. Our distribution deal with Simon Schuster kicks in December 1st, and everything that we release starting next year is going to go through them. We are also going to reissue about 2 dozen of our back catalog titles. Not everything will get reissued through Simon and Schuster, but a majority will. Because some of it just doesn't make sense, and some of it we're doing some really fun stuff for, like the novelettes. Those don't make sense to reissue, but a lot of those we are packaging into new expanded editions, whether they're collections or just adding a couple stories on. Where we have D7 from Fracassi.
Yep.
Well, we took that and now we added 13 more stories and novelettes, and now it's a collection called Traps and Specters, and that's coming out next year. That's 90,000 words. That's something a bookstore could put on its shelf, a brand new collection from Fracassi. That feels great. We did the same thing with I Zhang. She has IMI with us. That's now going to be an 120,000 word collection coming out in 2027 that has 40 stories in it. And that's the way that we're kind of reissuing these back titles, because we know that we can't just put the novelette out with Simon & Schuster. No one's going to buy that for their bookstore, but they will buy a 120,000 word collection. So that's a really
clever pivot. I like that. Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, and that's what we're doing with a lot of our others. Rest Stop is getting an expanded edition. We're adding a bunch of stories onto that. So that's going to become a full collection. Trying to think of some of the other ones. We have a couple of reprints coming up with Crossroads with Laurel Hightower is coming out. But the one I meant to mention was Sleep Alone with JAW McCarthy. We're adding extra stories onto that as well to make it novel length. It's like we were really close with that one. Let's just kind of get over the hump, and hopefully that'll appeal more to bookstores than the novella will. When, hey, this is novel length now, you could pick this up, you can carry this. Readers are going to be happy with the length of the book.
Wow. I mean, congratulations. That sounds great. It sounds like, but here's where I'll go with that. Obviously, it took a lot of work, and the thought that I had when you were talking about the distribution, like, problems that you encountered was, as much as it probably sucked and like was demoralizing and stuff. Those two like missteps probably were what got you Simon and Schuster. Like,
Oh, 100%. And I'm one of those people who believe that all the dominoes line up the way they're supposed to. I'm here doing what I'm doing because this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And all the things in my past, whether it's going to college for graphic design, whether it's having the dream of writing my own book and learning how to do layout on those things, whether it's starting that record label and having that record label be successful enough to fund these future endeavors. All of those things lined up so that I could be here today, sitting and talking to you and releasing these books and doing these things the way that I can. Because I had dreams of publishing my book back in college. I had dreams of 21-year-old Alan out there releasing it, but the dominoes weren't right yet at that time. The indie publishing space was not what it is today. There was no such thing as Kindle back then. You couldn't get your book out there the way you can today. Back then, you would have had to print 5,000 copies and store them in your garage and sell one at a time at a conference. That was the only indie publishing that existed back in 2001, but today we have Ingram, where anyone can sign up and anyone can get their book into the system that these bookstores use to order. Does that mean the bookstores are going to order them? No, it doesn't guarantee that, but it means they can. You at least have the opportunity, and sometimes you break through. Sometimes, Rest Up, that gets ordered by Barnes and Noble and gets stocked. Like that is a title that broke through. If in some alternate universe Nat would have come to me in 2001 and said, "Alan, publish this book," that wouldn't have happened. The opportunities wouldn't have been there. So, I am now today grateful that things went the way they did with distribution. Would I have been successful with that first distributor? Yes, I probably would have been, because I know other imprints that are on that distribute with them, and they do very well. So not knocking that first distributor at all, other than them stringing me along for as long as they did, because that just didn't feel great. But that would have been successful. Would it have been as successful as Simon and Schuster? Would I have been ready to do the things that we're now doing today? Maybe not, probably not, and so, I think that we're in a great position right now, and the last 3 years have all led to that position, and has set us up for the success that I hope is coming starting next year.
yeah. Well, you mentioned audio, so is there anything you can say about the audio aspect? of that conversation?
Yeah, so those conversations went well, and they ended up licensing the audio for the expanded edition of Rest Stop. And so that'll be coming out through Simon and Schuster instead of us producing it on our own. I wish we could do more audiobooks. I love audiobooks. They're my preferred reading. Well, immersive reading is my preferred version of reading. I love reading the paperback while listening to the audio. That is the way that I experience stories the best. I know it's a little expensive because I end up buying two copies of every book,
Yeah.
but that is the way that I prefer. It's just audio is so expensive for indie. You know, your the market rate. The SAG sets the rates at, I think, $210 per finished hour is where it's at currently. So if you have an 8 hour audiobook, you're paying, $1,600-$1,700 up front for that. And then the
Yeah.
cuts from Audible are terrible. And so you're making maybe $2 a book there, and the reality is we're not always going to sell, 900 copies of an audiobook to break even. And that's not even to make
Yes.
a profit for us or the author. That is just to break even on the recording costs.
Right.
And so it's very prohibitive to do audio as an indie. Now, you don't have to go with a SAG narrator. You could hire, your friend from YouTube, but that's not always going to result in the best audiobook. Sometimes, yeah, they'll blow you away, but not always. And so to be able to afford those for the few audiobooks that we've done, it's been costly, and luckily we're working now with some professional audio who are SAG, and they have agreed to do royalty splits, which is fantastic because now we
Yeah.
can get more of our audio out there. But because they're putting in all that time up front for what is not a guaranteed paycheck, they have to be careful about which projects they accept. So it's not like we can just dump, 40 titles at their doorstep and say, yeah, narrate all of these. That doesn't work. They have to pick and choose the ones that they think are going to be successful enough to make it worth the time that they're putting in on that. So yeah, I love that Simon Schuster is interested in more of our audio. It helps that, they're now going to be distributing that book, which when they started that conversation, that wasn't the case. I was with Ingram when they started that conversation, it's just they liked the book enough. But now that we're with them, I see the opportunity for more of our books to maybe go to
Right.
Simon Schuster Audio or Simon Maverick, their other audio label, and kind of get things out that way. And I mean, my fingers are crossed for it because, again, I love audio. It's my favorite way to experience a book. So,
Yeah. Simon Maverick is that new. It's Jason Pinter, right? Isn't he the one who's running that? And he did
yes.
great stuff with. I'm looking on my shelf, Polis, and a couple of other publishing. Yeah, I like him. I think he's. I think he does quality work. So
Yeah. No, he was great to communicate with.
yeah, he's a cool guy. That's taking me back because like I don't know if you know the author Rob Hart.
Yes.
Yeah, I've known Rob since like 12 years ago or something like that. And so when Rob was starting to publish, he was with Polis. And so but that's like time machine. It's taking me way back. We've been talking a lot of nuts and bolts. But really honestly, like for me, it's the excitement of the stories, like that's the reason I do a podcast. I want to talk about the stories. And I'm assuming as the publisher, you would want to praise every single, title, every single author you've worked with. But is there any kind of standout experience or like fun story for a particular title that jumps out at you? I know obsolescence for you was like that, display piece. This is me. This is what I do. That's awesome. Was there along the way, like, are there any other kind of like cool, fun stories that came from any of the titles you've put out?
Um,
I know that's like a real
there's
not
probably
easy
a
thing.
dozen, but being put on the spot. I
Yeah.
guess the first one can think of because I see it behind you is Clay's book "Stay on the Line," which ended up being illustrated by Trevor Henderson.
Right.
That was originally submitted as a chapbook. It was supposed to be part of the Chapman chapbook catalog, and I read it and I was like, Clay, this is too good to be a chapbook. No disrespect to chapbooks, but this is too good. The chapbook we would have sold 100 copies and 200 or 100 to 100 150 copies, and it would have just died. The chapbooks are not. Because we can't distribute them, they're not something that sell well. They're really fun for people who like those stories. They're really fun for those authors, but they're not big sellers. And I was like, this story is too big to let it fade away that quickly. And so that was one where I started getting the idea of like, oh, what if we could do something like Cycle of the Werewolf, where we could do like insert images, throughout. So it's not fully illustrated, but you kind of get some of the vibes throughout. And I asked Clay, I was like, if you could work with anyone, who would you want to work with? And Trevor was the first and only name he had for me on that side. And Stay on the Line is one of those stories where it's just perfect.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stories where it's like, okay, I really like this story. I think this can do well. I think this will be exciting for readers. And I enjoy it, that kind of thing. But Stay on the Line was one of those ones where it's like, I wish I had written this. I'm so freaking jealous of you. It was one of those where it was like, I want my name on this story. I like it so much. And so that was fun that we both got to, I got to work on this incredible story and it didn't go somewhere else. But B, it was one of those things where what started as what was going to be a simple chapbook ended up becoming, something that got reviewed in the New York Times and something that got nominated for the Shirley Jackson Award. Like that wouldn't have happened if it was a chapbook. I'm so glad that Clay let me produce it as a paperback. And we got it out there. It's now in his new collection, Acquired Taste, without the
Yep.
illustrations. So we're still making it available for those who want a copy with the illustrations and want a print copy on its own. But yeah, that was a really fun project to work on for all of those reasons, and just because, like I said, the story is one of those stories where it's like, I wish this was mine kind of thing. It's so good. I think the next time I had that experience was with Annie Neugebaur and The
Yes.
Extra. That was one where she pitched that to me. Yes, she pitched that to me, and I was like, oh God, this is so good. I wish this was mine, kind of thing. And that's her debut book. So another example of, even though we're 3 years into this, like we still take on new authors. It's not just like, oh, give me your Clays, give me your Nats, give me your Fracassis, give me your Haley Pipers. Like, no, if you have a good story, you have a good story. And I don't care if you have, 10 followers online or 10,000 followers online. If it's a good story, I'm going to want to work on it with you and do what we can. And that was another one when I got that pitch, and the email was so short. It was like 3 sentences. And I was like, yes, I want this, before I even read it, and thankfully it was good once I read it because it would have been bad the other way. But yeah, that was a very exciting email to get.
That story. So I was aware of it because it was part of like your roster for this year, and it came in the I feel like I'm doing Donald Trump hands. It makes me very self-conscious. But it came in that, quarterly box, and I was like, cool, yeah, but it wasn't like in my plans. And then I was sitting around, my girlfriend was hanging out with me here one night, and we were just gonna sit and read for a little bit. And I was like, I don't want to. I was I'm in the middle of Mark Z. Danielewski's Tom's Crossing, which is
Mm,
12 over 1,200 pages long. And I was
that's
like,
a thick one, yeah.
I'm not taking that on the balcony. I need something quick and easy. So I was like, oh, I just got all the shortwave stuff. And I saw that, and I was like, I'm just gonna, and I read the, the little hook again, and I was like, this'll do. This is good. This is good. So I sat down on the balcony, and I was like, holy shit, is this book? And I will, not only will I sing the praises of that because it's such a great story, and it's so like there's tension, and it's so fast, and it's just like it's so well done. Um, but then like when I found out there was going to be two more in that series, I was like, yes, please give me more of this. But then also the design on that, like she had you made it make a little trail map, and that that design kind of made it into like the back part of the cover, I believe. Like you can see the little
Yeah.
and so, and I love the story that she actually created those bookmarks that were distributed as part of that box, like the little plasticky kind of bookmarks with the cutouts of the paper people.
Yeah.
Everything about the presentation of that book is fantastic, and that story, I that should win awards because it
We're
was
hoping.
like, dude, I'm telling you, like of all the titles I've read from Shortwave, I don't think I'm as excited about any title as I am for that because it was just so like out of nowhere and simple, but just so like effective. It's so good. I'm gushing right now because it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I'll let you know, the sequel is coming next summer, and I think the sequel's better.
Wow.
Yeah. I
That's
There's always that nerve of like, oh man, we're gonna do two more in this. The first one is so great. How are the other two gonna stack up? I was blown away when I got the other, which is the title of the sequel. Not a sequel, the next installment. Sorry. They all take place in the same universe, but they're not the same characters. You're following a different set of characters this time. And then the third one comes out in 27 in spring, which I'm still waiting on that draft, so can't comment on that one yet. But yeah, no, the other is fantastic, and I'm so excited for that to come out next year.
Yeah. She and then so her the extra came out on September 9th. And then
Yes.
you guys, this is a cool thing that you were able to do too. You planned 9 months later was the second book, and then 9 months following that was the third book, because nine is a special number for her and everything. And it didn't occur to me, like when I was talking to her, I did the whole episode to show her
Oh wow.
I've got a nine tattoo. Like
Nice.
so, I have a special connection with that in so many ways. But like yeah, like for the video people, I'm all about the visual stuff. One thing I forgot to uh, put on my shelf behind me is
All
the
the chapbooks, yes.
chapbooks. Yeah. So Nat's ones and Clay's and everything. So when I started getting these chapbooks, I was like, no one's doing chapbooks. This is so great. Um, then with your distribution deal and how like, your model is shifting a little bit, I'm like, what's going to happen to the chapbooks? Then I'm like, can he like spin off and do a little boutique label that's like a imprint of his own thing where he can continue to do these chapbooks and stuff. So
Well, I have good news for you. Simon and Schuster gave me the thumbs up to continue doing the chapbooks, so they will be through our own shop.
yeah.
They won't be through distribution, but they will continue into the future. We actually just started a new chapbook line with the Twisted Spine. So the Tales from the Twisted Spine, those will come out annually. I was chatting through email with Clay the other day about potential more Chapman chapbooks. So yeah, that is something that Simon Schuster approved because A, they can't do anything with them. So B, there's no reason to shut them down. They don't take anything away from the sales and that. So that was a conversation we had, and they're more than happy to see us continue with those. So
So it's not in competition with anything. So it's clear kind of is the way it goes.
yeah,
Yeah. That's cool.
yeah.
Um, I'm assuming then Killer VHS is a series that's going to continue going strong.
Yeah, we have contracted out through number 12 at this point. So we are definitely going to continue those. So that takes us through the next 2 years. Takes us to the end of 27 as far as Killer VHS contracts. That is a line that we are going to relaunch with Simon and Schuster. So the first seven that are out now will get updated editions, and then going forward, all the editions will match on Simon and Schuster. So that'll be fun. The seven that are out now through Shortwave with Ingram, those are gonna kind of be collector's editions kind of things because those will be going away and we'll be doing the new Simon and Schuster editions, which will get a little bit of a facelift, so a little bit of new branding. I'm kind of excited to tackle that again after because I had to set that design in stone back with Melonhead to make sure that they all match. And at that point, we had no idea what the series was going to do. You know, we only had two books signed in the series. It was just like, okay, this could be a fun duology, maybe trilogy. Maybe nothing happens with it. Fortunately, the series took off, and a lot of people really like it. And the reviews have been fantastic. In fact, the latest edition, and like this again, this hasn't been announced yet, but will be any second. The latest edition is getting a starred review in Library Journal for Laurel's entry, the Long Low Whistle. So yeah, it's just been doing really well. So I think it's time for a little bit of a facelift on the branding, the design, and then going forward, all of them will match on Simon and Schuster, and that'll be a lot of fun. And it will also give readers a chance to rediscover the first seven,
Yeah.
because we kind of have been just in our little corner of socials. Bragging about these books, and now we'll have a sales team behind them.
Yeah. That is so that makes me think of Joshua Milliken because so teleportasm you can see. So for anybody who's like watching who can see the video, the faced out ones are the ones I've talked about on the podcast, and then there's a little like collection of other ones I own that I haven't talked about on the podcast. But teleportasm, when I was talking to him, he said that he's friends with Brian McCauley, and then seeing Brian do Candy Cane Kills, and like he wanted to be a part of that series. Like he was drawn to Shortwave because he saw this cool series and he wanted to participate. So like even the stuff you're doing is like attracting talent. So um it seems like you got a really good play going here in general. So that was cool. I was happy to hear that like even just like the idea of people wanting to be a part of something is so you're attracting readers because of the quality and everything. You're attracting writers because of like the fun stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, it's been sometimes a little overwhelming. You know, we get a lot of submissions. Sometimes it's hard to say no, especially when you become friendly with folks and you're chatting every day and seeing each other online and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's really been a humbling experience getting to work with some of these folks, especially when it's people that, you know, like Nat, who I was reading before they came to Shortwave. You know, like I loved Nestlings and
Yeah.
I loved Wolf even more, which I was telling him about the other day. Like, you know, and having those people reach out, having their agents reach out, has been just the coolest feeling, you know, and it's one of those things where because of the way small business works, you know, I haven't really been able to take much of a paycheck over the last 3 years. Every once in a while, I can give myself a little bonus after paying royalties, you know, but most of it goes into editing is one area where you know, I can do developmental edits with an author, but I can't do line edits. I'm not you know, I can't sit
Yeah.
for hours staring at periods and commas. I can't do it. You know, so I hire out editing and I hire at professional rates. You know, it's not like my buddy who does it for $1 a page or well, even that would be high, but you know what I mean? Like it's not a friend who's doing it at a friend rate. It's, you know, these are people who have degrees and people who have years of experience doing these things and they charge rates accordingly. You know, and so the money stuff hasn't always been there, but hearing the feedback from folks about, you know, I had one author tell me this is the best book cover I've ever had, and they have a lot of good book covers out. But it was one that I designed, and they told me that, and that feels fantastic. I'm not going to say who because I don't want to have people comparing their their book covers, but you know, it's getting that kind of feedback, hearing from readers about how much they enjoyed one of the books, or how you know, when they turned the page and saw the first googly eye in the paperback of Rest Stop, how much that like freaked them out, and how much they loved it because you just don't see that in books often. You know, those things are payment enough for right now. Obviously, I cannot go the rest of my life volunteering my time. That doesn't work. But I can afford to take a couple of years to volunteer my time and build something.
Yeah.
And yeah, getting that feedback from folks and having authors that I respect, authors that have written stories that I love, reach out and want to work together like that. That means more than the token payments I've been able to take so far. You know, it's really a great feeling. And especially like, you know, when places like Twisted Spine reach out and say, "Hey, we want to do chapbooks and we want to do them with you." Wow, you could do
Yeah.
this anywhere else. You could do any other publisher. You could publish them yourself and save all this money, you know, but
Yeah.
knowing that they want to reach out, want to collaborate, you know, I've always been a collaborator. You know, back in my YouTube days, that's how I met Hank and John and so many other the people that I worked with was just doing collab videos. It was like, "Hey, I have an idea for a video. I need someone else in it. Do you want to be in my video with me," kind of thing, you know, and just kind of working together because I feel like you can create something so much bigger than you can create on your own, you know. And even the first, I had one trad book deal in the past, and it was a nonfiction book at O'Reilly Media. They're the company that do all the educational books with like the koalas and animals on the cover and stuff. They hired me to write a book about YouTube because at the time I was one of the 100 most subscribed channels on the entire platform. That's when you only needed 40,000 subscribers, not 40 million to hit that mark.
Yeah.
But you know, I did it, and they hired me to write the book, but they hired me to co-write it with somebody who was also an independent filmmaker. And so again, collaboration, you know, like that. A lot of the things that I have done have been that way. And yeah, so working with other people in that respect have just it's meant more than the paycheck so far. At some point, I'm going to have to prioritize the paycheck a little bit, you know, to keep this whole thing going, especially at the quality level I want to keep it going at. You know, good books require good advances and require good royalties and all of that, you know, and so I have big aspirations for Shortwave. That's going to come with big investments. But like I said, the Simon Schuster Turning Point should help with that. And yeah, it's up to this point, it's been great getting to work with those folks when they've reached out. It's meant a lot.
Well, I have a thing I'm going to pivot to, but before I do that, I want to say when I was talking to Todd Kiesling for Sundowner's Dance, which is such a great book and a beautiful
Yeah,
cover and everything
thank
about
you.
that is great. Um, he said that there's of all the indies he's worked with, there's only two indies that he would like readily work with again and again, and so it was you and it was Ghoulish. Um, but he said like you doubly so. I think for the most part, like his experience with you has not been matched by any other indie. So that's got to feel good. Like that's something that you can be proud of.
Yeah, I mean, especially on such a big book, like I really enjoy Todd's work. I feel like Sundowners is pretty near the top, if not at the top of his work. And that was a really fun project to work on. I loved doing the cover. That was actually the second version of the cover. We tried one where it was a cul-de-sac in a suburb with a bunch of eyeballs floating in the clouds above it. And as I was working on it, it wasn't working. It wasn't working. I was like, what if we take the same idea but just do bird's eye view? Like,
Yep.
let me look at and I sent him that design kind of out of nowhere because we had been working together on the first design. And I was like, hey Ty, I was just messing around with something this weekend. What do you think of this? And he's like, yes, that's the cover. Which is a great feeling when you're working with somebody who is also a very talented
Right.
cover designer, somebody who works a lot on book design and like he knows what he's talking about when it comes to this stuff. And so seeing him so excited about it, was again a really good feeling. I was so happy that I got to work with Todd, and we're working together again because Todd is as one of our Killer VHS authors now. So that book will be coming in the future.
That's awesome. Um, you mentioned it a little bit before, briefly, I think with Rest Stop, but it was shortlisted for Shirley Jackson Award, right? Or at
That
least,
was Stay on the Line.
oh, I'm
Rest
sorry.
Stop was the finalist for the Bram Stoker.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Not only are you making books that your audience is responding to, and you're creating an atmosphere where people want to publish through you, but like you're making some award-worthy content too. So like, what has that landscape been like for you? I know we mentioned a couple. Are there others that have been considered for awards as well?
Well, selfishly, the first award that we won was for Face the Night, my debut novel. That was the Hoffer Award for Best Commercial Fiction, which again felt really great. It was also our first starred review book. Kirkus gave it a starred review. They also listed it as one of the 100 best indie books of the year. So I got a special placement in that print edition when they did that. All of which felt great because, it was my first book. I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew I liked the story, but that didn't mean that it was going to resonate well with readers. And that was fantastic. And then since then, yeah, we've had quite a few. The second book that we published, the cozy mystery I mentioned earlier, got a editor's pick from Book Life, which is Publishers Weekly. Their indie line is Book Life for reviews. So that felt great. They also got a Publishers Weekly review eventually of the cozy mystery line as well, which was all praising, which again felt really good.
Nice.
Our biggest book as far as awards go, IMI. Like, no question. That was nominated for the Hugo, the Nebula, the Locust, the Aurora, and something else that I can't remember off the top of my head. It's on the catalog page, but that was just nominated for any award that you could think of in science fiction. And that felt great because science fiction is also a genre I've wanted to move more into. I've tried really hard, but everybody sends me horror. Even when I
Yeah.
explicitly ask the agent, I'm like, hey, if you have any science fiction, please send it to me. And they're like, sure, how about this horror book? So I get it. That's kind of our bread and butter. But I would love to do more sci-fi in the future. But yeah, no, and then yeah, we've had the Shirley Jackson for Stay on the Line. We've had the Bram Stoker for Rest Stop. There've been a few This Is Horror nominations and a few awards maybe there. I can't quite remember. And a lot of other. We also got the Next Generation Indie Book Award that was for Rest Stop, and Face the Night also got that one as a finalist. So yeah, it's been nice getting that recognition. A lot of them have been finalists. Not a lot of them have been winners up to this point.
Still.
But again, we're still in our first couple of years, and with there being 1,500 new books published every single week, knowing that we're one of those five finalists, when you tally up the thousands and thousands of books that are published every year, even being a finalist is great. I know it's the whole cliche thing of even just being, nominated is a win, but it is. It truly is when there's so many books out there that could have taken that spot, knowing that you kind of in that top, 1% or whatever. It's a great feeling for our authors. And unfortunately, there's also really great books we've done that have kind of gone under the radar. But I understand that not every book can win, and there's only so many slots on those finalist spots. So yeah, it's been good over the last couple of years, and I hope that moving forward, we're still considered and read for those types of awards because they can help a book a lot when readers are looking at like, hey, I'm just going to read Shirley Jackson Award winners for this next year or whatever. It's like, well, it'd be great if you could slot our books into there too. So
That's actually a really good point. So, back in the day, you mentioned This Is Horror Awards, so I'm going to mention. So these are my three This Is Horror Awards that I've earned.
oh,
Um,
nice,
but
congrats.
but all 2013 or earlier, like with the very beginning of This Is Horror Awards, I got Podcast of the Year a couple of times. I got Anthology of the Year one time because I published an anthology way back in the day in like 2013. Um, but the reason I bring that up, not just to like, toot my own horn, is that like so I was doing a podcast where it was book reviews and realized that the best novel category we had read, I think all but two of them. And so it was like, oh, let's just check out these other two. And so the category itself became a reading list for me. And that's how I first read Chuck Wendig. Wendig was nominated for Blackbirds, which is the first in the Miriam Black series, and we hadn't read it, so we're like, let's check this out. And then that started 12 years of reading Chuck Wendig or whatever. So what I'm getting at is that even just being on those lists,
Yeah.
that's something that like people, it's extra exposure. It's something that you're not doing that draws attention to your titles, but it also get like some people, that's how they decide. Like, all
Hmm.
right, I've read these, I want to read this as well, or this is a category I want to make sure that I read everything that's being considered like of the best. So yeah, just being even longlisted for something is gonna be helpful for getting more eyes on those stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also just kind of another form of social proof. Like if you're presented with 200 sci-fi collections that come out every year, whatever that number is, how do you know where to spend your money and your time? Your money and your time are very limited resources, and so you can't just randomly choose, but you also can't sit down and research 200 different collections.
Yep.
But if there is, a Hugo Award that has, seven finalists, eight finalists, however many finalists it is, well, okay, maybe that becomes the reading list. Maybe those are the seven you focus on, because they've said like, hey, we've read all 200, and this is where we think the tops are. And obviously not as a jury, but they have people submitting votes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's another form of social proof. The same thing that you would see whether it was a blurb from a really famous author, or if you can hit number one on Amazon, but those can be gamed so much with BookBubs and other things like that. So it's really just a statement of quality of like, hey, this is worth your 17.99 and your few hours of reading, kind of thing, where you don't have that social proof on some other books, and it's like, well, maybe I'm a little bit more weary about this one. So yeah, they're very beneficial in that way, and also as way for authors to help build their careers. Once you win something like that, you can forever say that you're an award finalist or award winner in that category, and that can be very helpful in the future, both when trying to get new things published, but also when trying to get readers to check out your next book.
Yep. Yeah. One thing while you were talking about that, one thing that occurred to me was in my short time now and again as a bookseller, I've, like just kind of like part-time seller for extra money here and there. General advice that I give people is like when you're looking at a book and you're looking at all like the different like accolades that they put on the cover, pay attention to book lists and library journal. Like if you see recommendations from those, I'm like those are librarians telling librarians what to get. And so these are
Mhm.
really informed people. This isn't some random magazine that, existed for a month. That is a really solid recommendation. So like when people are like, I don't know what to get, that's advice that I gave them is like look for those because these are really, really, really knowledgeable people who are, if they're putting their endorsement on a book, that means a lot to me. Like that means that there's some quality going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really great when you can get people who love books talking about your books. It's one thing to have TikTokers who are visual trying to get your book out there, that kind of stuff. But when you're somebody who is a trusted reader, a trusted reviewer, whether that is Library Journal, or even if that's just an Instagram account that you follow that has similar tastes, if that person is recommending a book, I'm going to pay attention. If Nat Cassidy tells me you got to read this book, I'm going to read that book, So yeah, it's
Yep.
so helpful in that arena of just kind of like, I can come on here and tell you, hey, I promise this book is good. I promise that, that we're never going to publish something bad, that you're always going to get something out of it, kind of thing. But that doesn't mean as much as somebody that they trust or they look, know that has a similar reading kind of vibe to them. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And that's why I do this. I fucking know what I'm talking about. And so I want to help other people find these kind of amazing stories. One thought that I had, and I may have, yeah, I think it was when I was talking to Annie about the extra, was the idea that publishing with someone who has built a reputation. And so I'll say that Shortwave has a following for as a publisher. So regardless of, so like, Clay has his, dedicated readers, and Nat has his dedicated readers and stuff like that. Todd has his audience, all that. Shortwave has an audience. So like if someone is to publish through you, probably your shortwave kind of community is going to pay attention to that. And I don't think that that's the case with a lot of kind of indies. And so that kind of feels good too. I was talking to Andy and I was like, you're publishing on a platform that you know is going to give you exposure. It's going to give you a better opportunity to get in front of readers. And so that's got to feel good too. And so I don't even have a question there, but that's just like something that I'm not every indie publisher has um like a public kind of reputation in the way that Shortwave does. And so that's got to be helpful for like the rising tide lifts all boats kind of things. Like people trust Shortwave because of this. I'm going to look at Shortwave for this because I know that I liked the other thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's always been a goal. When I first started publishing, and I started talking to the cozy mystery writer Nicole, and she was like, what do you hope Shortwave becomes? Because I was asking her to trust me with her book, and I had only published one book at the time, my own. So yeah, we had that conversation, and I was so new to the publishing world. I was like, I want to be the horror publisher. I want to be the Tor of horror publishing. I want to have a name that people know that there is a base level of quality. If you're a science fiction fantasy reader and Tor puts something out, there's a base level of quality there that you're going to enjoy. And I didn't even know Nightfire existed at this time. There
Yeah.
already is a Tor of horror. I just didn't know it. I was so new. But that was my answer, is that I wanted Shortwave to become a place where you were like, okay, it's a Shortwave book, I'm going to give it a chance. And that only comes from the consistent quality of what we're putting out. It means not putting out anything that's not edited well, anything that's not designed well, anything that's maybe a little rough around the edges. It means a consistent quality there. But that's also something I'm trying to foster with like our book boxes. If we get a number of subscribers to the book boxes, that is a guaranteed number of sales for every book that is that we release, because those releases go into the book boxes. And this year was our first year doing it, 2025. I think it went okay. I think the response was fantastic to the quality of the books, the quality of the boxes. We got them all out on the first day of every single quarter this year, which is not easy to do as an indie press. It means you have to have the books sometimes ready 3-4 months in advance of their release date. We had really cool merch that went with every one of them. Like, I was really proud of our book boxes this year, and they made a little bit of profit, which is even better. But that is a guaranteed base level of readers that are going to be brought to those books. I'm hoping next year that we're going to get twice as many subscribers. I think with this year, we really proved that we can do what we said we can do. We can deliver on those boxes. And I'm hoping that over time that grows into a bigger and bigger business of, hey, make this one easy purchase at the end of each year, and you get all of our books next year, nice and easy. You don't have to think about it. They're delivered to your door, some of them early. We have to change things up a little bit next year just because of the delay with the Simon and Schuster stuff, to where we're probably going to go to 3 boxes for the year, and they might not always arrive at the first of the quarter. They might, arrive a little bit into the quarter because we're still working out printing timelines and all. Like this first year is going to be such a transition year that I don't want to promise anything that I can't deliver on, because I've never wanted to be that person that can't deliver what they promise. But we are doing them again next year, which is the first place. This is the first place I'm talking about that, although we'll be announcing them publicly very soon. And yeah, I just hope that we can get more subscribers each year, because that does then, when an author comes to us, be like, well, hey, I can guarantee you this number of sales. I can guarantee this is going out to these podcasters, these reviewers, these, everything that are going to be talking. No, may not guarantee they're talking about the book, but at least they're getting the book. And yeah, I think if we can keep up that consistent quality, if we can keep making books that are interesting, even if they're not always everybody's cup of tea, that hopefully we can retain that fan base, for lack of a better word, and that following. It also helps, I think, that I'm a pretty open book on socials. I talk about our sales. I talk about some of the struggles that come with the lack of distribution, other things like that. But we also celebrate our authors every day when, they're getting good reviews or good blurbs, or we hit another milestone for something. It's certainly not a self-serving thing. I really want the focus to be not so much the company, but the books that we're putting out. But I think that by showing some of the behind the scenes, showing that, hey, this is, a couple of humans getting together and trying to make something cool for you. And, we're going to try to sell it to you at a fair price. And we're, not going to ever take you for granted, kind of thing. That really helps humanize stuff when we are pushing a limited sale or a new edition of something, like it's not just force feeding sales all the time. It's like, hey, we're all just trying to make something really cool. Sad we have to charge this much for shipping, but that's what USPS charges us. And, sad that we have to charge this much for the book, but hey, printing costs were, $8 on this one. So we kind of have to raise the price on it, and just kind of being open with folks, I think, has helped cultivate that little bit of fan base and stuff. And then hopefully, yeah, they feel they can trust us because we have not let them down yet. And we'll hopefully can continue to not let them down. I am, just one person, and I will make mistakes, but I try really hard not to let any of those mistakes make it through to the final product.
Yeah. I guess the biggest question is, like, do you ever take time off?
No, unfortunately, currently, mostly because I do have a second book that I would like to finish one of these years. It's a really unique book, and some other folks have already contributed to it. And I feel terrible that their contributions are just sitting on my hard drive collecting dust, because I can't find the blocks of time to work on the book. I'm a very slow writer to begin with. But yeah, I'd love to take some time to work on that. I'm hopeful that in the future that'll happen, because so much of what I do right now, on top of, designing the books and negotiating the contracts and promoting the books and all that, so much of that is wholesale sales and just direct sales. Both of those things should be going away next year. We should no longer have to do wholesale orders and deal with those, because we'll have Simon Schuster doing that. We should no longer have to be worrying about, reaching out to individual bookstores and keeping those relationships intact. Not that I'm going to completely ignore those places, but we should have somebody else doing that. And so I'm hoping that will free up my time a little bit. The extended timelines also with the books, I'm hoping will help. No more of the last minute stuff, no more of the, hey, Alan, can I get it to you next month instead of this month, which then causes me to have to rush at the last minute and not take those breaks because I'm spending my Saturdays working on them, kind of thing. I'm hoping that a lot of that stuff goes away. And I can take the time to finish my second book. I can take the time to sit and do a movie marathon on a Saturday instead of working through the day, kind of thing, is kind of the hope. But right now I understand that what Shortwave needs is my full attention all day. I understand that's what it needs to succeed. That is the only reason we've gotten to the place that we have gotten to as quickly as we've gotten there. We're recording this on October 4th. This is the 3-year anniversary of the release of that cozy mystery book, to the day. So we have been publishing other people for just 3 years, and we have a distribution deal with Simon and Schuster. We have these starred reviews. We have these awards. 3 years is a very short amount of time to do that in, and that only becomes because I'm working all day and on the weekends. And for the most part, I love what I do. There are always going to be small annoying things about the job that are just kind of like, oh, I don't want to do this today, but for the most part, I'm excited every day to get to the computer. I get to work on cover art. I get to work on interior design. I get to work on these really cool stories with these really cool people. That is a dream come true. That's not something I'm going to sit here and complain about. But yes, for balance, I know that I'm going to need to take some time off. I know, to not burn out, I'm going to need to take that time to work on my own creative projects as well. And I'm hoping that that time is coming.
So everybody, be nice to Alan so we can keep getting these books. Don't burn him out. Don't overwhelm him.
I mean, everyone's really great about it, like, certainly not, putting that on anyone. It's just, there's just a massive amount of work to do when you're releasing 15 books a year. It's just, that's just the reality of it, and then not only that, but then you're also having to support the books you already have out, and so when somebody needs, a restock order of this, or an author wants, 10 more copies for the signing they're doing next month, and, all those things, it's just, yeah, individually, those are all really small things, but when you're doing that for 40 different books, 50 different books as you're going forward, it just, they add up.
Yeah. Wow. Don't envy you, but I'm very happy that I get to keep reading the results of your efforts.
And I mean, and I appreciate that. I love that you signed up for the book box this year. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. It was such a new thing and a new experiment, and I think it went really well. So happy, excited to do those next year.
So just not as like maybe a soft sales pitch, but the benefit of the boxes is for me, the benefit of the box is like I make one purchase and I forget it, I get everything for the year. But it's like at a little bit of a lower cost too, I believe, because you're kind of just consolidating. So um, if you know you're going to want to read a bunch of shortwave stuff,
Yeah,
the box just like saves you
the
time, it saves you money.
Yeah, because the books release about once a month on average. If you were to buy them all individually, the shipping cost is really what adds up. I think the minimum shipping cost right now, even if you're in the same state as me, is like $5 or $6 a book.
Yep.
And so if we know that we can give you 15 books and only have to ship them 3 times instead of ship them 15 times, well, yeah, I can take 15% off, for you, and save all that money. And so that, I mean, that's basically where the discount comes in. The books are basically the same price for the most part. It's really just, do you want to pay shipping 15 times, or do you want to pay shipping 3 or 4 times? And that's where that money saves, the money save comes from. So yeah, the depending on when this goes up, the next campaign for our subscription boxes will be October 15th through November 15th. It'll be on Kickstarter, so you can go to our website, or any of our socials. We'll have links to it. You can also just search for Shortwave book boxes, and then it should come up, that kind of thing. But yeah, the more the merrier with that. We have a lot of great books coming out next year. And I'm excited to put those boxes together again. And my partner Kristen helps me a ton with those. She does the majority of the packing of the boxes. She's also taken on the majority of the packing for direct orders when we get them on our shop, because it got to a point where it was just too much for me. I was like, okay, do I spend my morning working on contracts, or do I spend my morning packing up Candy Cane Kills copies? And thankfully, she's been able to take on most of the packaging and shipping stuff for me. So.
Well, high praise to her. Thank her so much from everybody's
Will
because
do, yeah.
yeah, like I love getting books from you guys. So before we wrap up, anything any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't cover that you think is important for people to know about shortwave, or just things that you're happy or excited about right now?
Um, I'm excited about our upcoming titles, but that's just by default. No, I mean, yeah, truly, the next 2 years have some really great things. We're going to be working on Obsolescence 2 soon, the follow up to that anthology, which is something I get to edit with my friend Christina, and so I'm extremely excited to do that again. The first one was such a great experience, so be on the lookout for that, whether you're a reader or a writer, because we will have open subs for that. Um, I guess if I had any like parting words, it would just kind of be like, I think it'd be really cool if more people started indie presses, but I think it would be cool if they understood going into it better the amount of work it's going to be, and the hours you're going to have to put in without pay for a number of years. I think people underestimate both of those. And so love
and the
seeing new presses start,
and the
but
upfront cost, right?
and the upfront costs. Like, yeah, mostly, we do advances for, we started with signing bonuses. They were very small. It was just kind of a, hey, we recognize that we can't give you thousands of dollars in advance. So let's just do a small signing bonus and then we'll split the royalties fairly and that kind of stuff. We've now moved to an advance model where we are able to, do advances on books and stuff like that. But that also means, when we have 20 books signed for the next 2 years already, that's a lot of advances when you multiply that out. And that's money we're not going to see again for another 24 months. So it's a lot to take on, and I just think that the better you understand that, the more successful you're going to be, and the less you're going to piss off authors when you have to shut down early or cancel releases or unfortunately sometimes not pay royalties. Like, those are things that I have seen happening. Those are things that will never happen with Shortwave. I can guarantee that, just because I have the funding from the previous business to make sure that royalties are always going to be paid, advances are always going to be paid. These things aren't going to. The only way that Shortwave goes away at this point is if I personally tire out and can't do it anymore. But the money side of it is a thing where, like, and I don't talk about that publicly often because I realize that I am in a huge place of privilege to be able to even say that. But I also want our readers and our authors to know that, like, this is secure. This isn't a thing that's going to go away overnight, which unfortunately I've seen with a lot of presses. So do your homework and make sure that you're in a very solid footing before deciding to launch a press. But if you are in that footing, please launch a press. I'd love to see more horror presses out there. I'd love to see more books getting published professionally, and because I want to read them.
Yeah. Yeah, in my years, I've seen a lot of like people with stars in their eyes and all the best intentions in the world. And I will point out, most people go into starting a little indie press with good intentions and like good hopes and everything like that, but just completely unprepared and really not thinking it's a job and it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
Like just thinking I get to publish stories, yay. Um, and so they're not setting themselves up for success, which is unfortunate. And um, yeah, like you have to take it seriously, I think is the the lesson that I've seen people not understand over and over again.
Yeah. And it's so unfortunate because they're dealing with other people's work, other people's, time and sweat and energy. And it's just such a disservice.
Mhm.
Before I launched my first book, like, I spent 2 years on YouTube and other places where people were, I was on BookTube just watching, like, how to self-publish a book, how to run a small press, how to get your book out there into distribution. Like, I just spent time day in and day out watching those things and learning all the pitfalls so that I didn't make the mistakes that dozens of other people have already made and made videos about. Hey, don't make the same dumb mistake I made. They'll tell you exactly what they did and what they did wrong. And they're using the same platforms you'd be using. They're on Ingram, they're on KDP, they're on, Draft to Digital, these places that you'll be using. So go learn from their mistakes. And then, hopefully you won't repeat those mistakes, and maybe you'll make some of your own new mistakes, but it'll put you in a much better place than if you just kind of go in blind and say, oh yeah, this is fun. I can do this. If so and so can do this, I can certainly launch a book. It's just not as easy, I think most people think, especially if you're going to take on any kind of volume of titles.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. And I like the point of you're dealing with someone else's work. So I've just been a podcaster this whole time, but I used to do a different podcast for like 10 years. I did this podcast. And when I stopped doing that podcast, I still have those episodes available because like people spent their time like coming in, talking and having conversations about their books and stuff. I don't want that to just vanish. Like if they're kind of relying on that as like, hey, this is where I talked about my book. So, I just pay to keep those episodes available. Because you see like, someone will publish a story on a website and that website vanishes and that story's gone forever. And
Yeah.
that's kind of sad. So yeah, like taking it seriously. Um, I like to see when people are very, intentional about stuff like that. So we've been yapping for a while. Alan, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me, but massive thanks for just diving in. And like you said, like, I want to read these things. you are making it possible for people to read stuff that traditional wouldn't look at. That who was I talking to? I can't remember. I saw one of the people who was, from where um, there needs to be spaces like this that, create an opportunity that doesn't exist traditional. Maybe it was Nat, because um, I was like, Tor's not looking at rest stop. That's not the kind of thing they want to do. There's got to be places that make a home for those because it's an excellent thing, but it's a different. So like having an space that creates that is vital and it's necessary, and I think this is the right time for it. So thanks for all your tireless work over the last few years, bringing all this to everybody to enjoy.
Thank you. I'm just so glad that readers are connecting with it and picking these up. That's the best reward.
Yeah. And thanks for your time. I really appreciate. I know I talk to authors and stuff, but like I think people would, love to hear more about like what actually goes into being a shortwave publishing. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.